Developments are all very well, but they can also have a negative effect if you've gone just a little bit too far with something. We'll see.
We will see. But, well, on the top of that, you lead us nicely to it, Keith, of what you've already said. MotoGP, I think at the end of last year, has sort of announced their confirmation that they are amending the sporting, technical, medical and disciplinary rules, or some of them. Some of the changes they've announced are they obviously a minimum qualification time now, revised checks for ride height and aero parts, brake sizes, a ban on aerodynamic rider equipment, and confirmation of the new Moto3 and Moto2 minimum age limit coming in a couple of years' time. And, of course, all of this being improved for safety purposes, Keith. And you know a bit more about some of the safety measurements they're trying to implement, aren't they? We've chatted about it before, of course. We had EM Motorsport on, who, of course, do the flag panels, telling us about how they're hoping to improve rider safety. But, of course, it's so difficult, isn't it, when a rider at the front falls coming out of a corner in the middle of the pack. It's not the ones that are immediately around him. It's the ones who haven't seen him yet. How are they going to deal with that?
Let's move to the beginning of that conversation, shall we, Harry? First of all, the situation is the rules have been tidied up. There have always been things that IRTA, the FIM, Dorna wish they got across before they actually appear. The MSMA, obviously the MSMA, the Manufacturers Association, they work together to make the rules package, or they make suggestions, and then IRTA and the rest put that package in the rule book and they all agree on it. Now, if there's something that within the rules that appears, like Ducati usually, that appear with something on their motorbike, it can't be banned there and then unless all the manufacturers agree. And of course, Ducati won't agree, so that will mean that it can't be banned there and then. But it can be banned the next year. So they might only have the pleasure of that particular thing during the current year. That's still in the rules. That's still the way it is. Manufacturers have got to agree with these things. Regarding aero, we've all talked about when's it going to be that we've got wings on the arms or the shoulders and the like to try and enhance aero overall the motorbike. So we knew stuff like that was coming. Regarding the stuff that Pete, particularly, he was the first man I seem to remember journalistically that came up with the automatic onboard options regarding safety and the like. Moto2 and Moto3 will be testing a system later on in the year where hardwired to the rain light is a system that basically, when there's an accident that's happened in the front bunch, the next group, if you like, or the nearest to it, will see flashing lights. The lights will flash at the back of the bikes in front of them. Of course, that doesn't rule out a tangle between the front few. The problem they do have, you remember I mentioned, why don't they put an LED light in the helmet that flashes simultaneously with whatever warning they're trying to give, a flag signal or whatever it is. Apparently the big issue there is the Bluetooth between the bike and helmets is not stable at the moment. They've not quite got that tech to work properly. And when you think, some riders have 3, 4, 5 helmets, spare helmets, and that's all got to be synced to the motorcycle, so that if that Bluetooth doesn't operate quite well, and it's got to be stable, it's got to be consistent and sustainable. So that system is in testing as well. But the main thing is the rain light flashing. That's going to be something we're going to see in Moto3 and Moto2 testing later this year, 2022. That's coming to us. So they're working on it. I mean, everybody's looking at the new things. Biofuel. The big problem you've got at the moment is motorbikes are going too fast now. I can't believe I'm saying that. But all these extra bits and pieces that we're getting on the bikes are making the things too easy to ride. They're far too easy to ride. A rookie can jump on a MotoGP bike now and ride it almost as well as the fastest guys out there. We've seen it. And this is a situation that we're moving towards. Ride height adjustment. It's a problem. Whole shot device. Whole shot device might stay because that gets nice, consistent launches off the line. But the ride height adjustment that we're now getting in a straight line is, again, motorbikes are faster down a straight. They're getting even faster down a straight because they've got that stability and the positioning of the bikes and the suspension that gives it the opportunity to get on the gas that fraction earlier and keep it sat down and finding grip. So all these things are contrary to what they want to work towards within the rules. So I think the other thing with ride height adjustment as well is bloody expensive to develop because it's got to be wind tunnel. There's quite a lot of development that goes behind it. It's costly, whereas it's quite cheap when it's on the bike. It's not an expensive upgrade to put on the bike once you've developed a system that works in the way that they want it to work. And I think that's where, again, Ducati have stolen a bit of a march. Probably something to do with all them wind tunnels and things that they've got access to in Maranello or something. I would imagine that must have something to do with it. But there are things. You know, I spoke to Danny Aldridge, technical director of MotoGP. We've had him on the show before. I said, "What's coming up this year?" And my trick question was, what do you foresee? What are you looking at that you want to get banned before it happens? And I didn't see him because we were only on a phone conversation, but I could imagine him throwing his hands in the air as if to say, "I wish we knew," because obviously it's a fairly small team that he directs that are trying to preempt a whole paddock full of very clever people trying to circumnavigate the rule book, which is not an easy task, believe me. And again, it comes back down to that banning situation. If all all the manufacturers agree unanimously that something should be banned for something safety-wise or whatever it is, it will be banned immediately. But if they don't agree unanimously, which of course they never will do if a manufacturer's come up with something pretty good, it can be banned next year. I think, Harry, actually, Formula One man, I think they've got something similar to that in Formula One, don't they? Where you know, if somebody comes up with something interesting in Formula One, it can't be banned until the following year if the rest of the team
it's happened time and time again. Like in 2000 when they changed, it's normally when they change the regulations. So for instance, it could well be this year when there's someone's found a loophole, or it's an Braun GP, of course, famously in 2009 with the blown diffuser. You know, it took everybody ages to catch up with that halfway through the season because they couldn't ban it, and then of course that Braun ran away with it by then. But then at the end of the season for next, banned because it's not allowed. So it could be the same thing again.
Why is it the child in me that laughs when you say blown diffuser?
Come on, Keith. We're technical here. Come on. We're in the technical part of the show. Technical terms only.
It's. I mean, I think MotoGP is fantastic, as you know, and I think that we have got the right level of rules. I think that little tweak here and there that Ducati come up with is fantastic. It just gets everyone else on their toes. I mean, like, I just think they've got it right at the moment, but they will be doing more inspections during the course of this year. I mean, we're back to what is pre-COVID rules. I think is something we've got to remember. We've been on a tech freeze for so long. We are now back to pre-COVID rules. So, you know, look at everything that we were normally able to do during the course of a winter, and that should be done for 2022. Unless Yamaha at the moment, of course, and Quartararo, who's still waiting for whatever they've developed for him. It's going to be a really, really great test. I can't wait. I wish I was there. Have you seen the trouble, Pete? You're still in Thailand, so you know all about trouble because they've banned so much in Thailand. I was supposed to be there last week as well, but unfortunately, the so many. Doesn't matter what's happening in the UK. Globally, it's getting more tricky to travel to these places, and the hoops that people are having to jump through to actually get to trackside, to get first-hand information. I mean, I said it in a tweet this week, actually. I mean, hats off to journalists that are spending pretty much in the main their own money to get to a track, to produce the kind of information that we need, you know, to consume here. I just think that it's incredible what the testing, the fact that they can't go anywhere, the flights, and then you run the risk you could land, and then somebody that sat next to you or 2 rows away or whatever it is has got COVID, so therefore you get locked down as well just because you've been near someone that's tested positive. It's just awful situation still in so many different countries, and Malaysia are being quite tough on it as well. So hats off to journos, I think, and you won't hear that very often.
Well, Pete, of course, you're the closest sort of to testing out of all of us. But yeah, how are you dealing with all the restrictions in place? It's difficult because you are the journalist out of all of us.
Yeah, well, as you say, I mean, Malaysia, I think, will be one of the strictest events held since the COVID pandemic began. So maybe people are thinking, oh, well, you know, it's things are loosening up now. I think I've seen, you know, we're in the same WhatsApp group as Keith, and you see all the information that's being given for people that are going. You know, they can only stay in 2 different hotels. That's it, and you've got to do all the paperwork and the apps and the COVID tests. And we've seen a rider, of course, Jack Miller, who's tested positive. You know, asymptomatic and isn't able to travel. I mean, as Keith says, you know, that can easily happen. You've got to do a test, was it 72 hours before you travel? I mean, there could easily be a late upset with a rider or key members of a team who could either just before they board a plane or when they arrive in Malaysia and they do a test, are suddenly, ruled out of action. And we've been lucky in that we haven't had, I don't think in any real top motorsport championship, any, let's say, title contenders ruled out by this kind of thing. But you just wonder how long we can stay lucky, don't you? And fingers crossed that Jack Miller, he's got time now. The Ducati launch has been sort of messed up by this, isn't it? They've had to postpone it. But Jack is in Australia, we should say, so he will now presumably fly directly to Malaysia, and he's got enough time. He's not doing the shakedown test because he's not a rookie, so he's got until February the 5th to basically pass that 72-hour test, isn't it? Where you've got to be free of COVID, and then you're able to fly. And so hopefully Jack's okay to get on there, but it just serves as a warning for everyone that you can jump through all the hoops, you can do all the paperwork, and then you can have a surprise. I mean, Jack, we saw the video that he put out, asymptomatic. He had no idea that he was ill, and suddenly the test result comes in, and it just throws all your plans into the air, really.
I think MotoGP did a remarkable job last year to get all of their personnel. When you consider how many people there are on site in a MotoGP paddock, and you'll know this, both of you, paddock life, when somebody gets food poisoning or something in the paddock, half the paddock goes down. That's how it works. We're all in such close proximity to each other. And without getting too gross, I mean, the toilet facilities and the like, people are in and out of toilets, personal hygiene and the like is something that's sort of slightly secondary to the speed at which you're working. So therefore, these things get bypassed slightly sometimes, and people get sick, and half the paddock gets sick. I was amazed last year at how well MotoGP coped with the COVID pandemic. Very few people got into that paddock that caused any kind of infection through COVID. Really, really impressive. But now with the Omicron version of it, asymptomatic is the word, isn't it? I mean, people don't know they've got it until they get tested for it. So we might find that that's going to be a bigger problem. And people change the rules. I mean, Thailand, as I alluded to a minute ago, have just changed the rules again. And now they've just changed them again for the 1st of February. So it can be on a week-to-week basis that governments or authorities, and it might not even be governments, it can be local regions of places where the tracks are, that change the rule at the last minute. Look at Novak Djokovic. I mean, that has got to be. The best thing that's come out of that is the warning shot. It's fired across the bows of everybody. I see Formula One of saying that if you're not vaxxed, you're not in. It'll be a similar situation in MotoGP and a lot of other sports, I believe, because the sport can be brought into disrepute by riders, drivers, tennis players not being able to take part because of the country's rules. And who is any individual sportsman, by the way, while I get up on my box, who the bloody hell is he to be able to dictate to a country their rules, their health rules that their people are going through and being restricted to? And suddenly Novak lands on the plot and expects to play. No, it's just not right. I'm sorry. And the same thing will apply or should apply in MotoGP. And I think Formula One have announced that it will apply in their situation as well. If you're not up to spec, if you don't produce the right stuff, then you're out. Fair enough. Everybody knows in advance. Don't argue with it. Forget about whether you should be compulsory vaccinated or not. If you want to take part in the sport and that is the rule, that is the rule.
Yeah, completely. I think we all agree with you there. We spoke about, obviously, Pete bringing up Miller having COVID. Also, another Aussie who has had to have a little trip to hospital, Remy Gardner, with a wrist injury. And he's had to have surgery on that as well. So, Pete, this is very close. Obviously, you mentioned a shakedown. He is obviously a rookie. He would be hoping to take part in that. Does that put him at risk a little bit of missing that?
I think he should. It's going to be tight, and I would say he's going to be pretty sore. But I think he's just got enough time, a couple of weeks. I think it was 2 screws. They sort of said it was a little fracture, but I mean, if you've got to have surgery for it, it can't be sort of that little, can it? So, I think.
Well, I think that Dr. Mir is pretty keen on that kind of stuff, and I think Remy, when you're young and fit like that, and again, if it is a little fracture and they've pinned it and sorted it, chances are he'll be okay for it. It isn't how you want to start the season. I was texting with Wayne the other day about it as well. I mean, he's so disappointed, Dad Wayne Gardner, of course, and it's kind of like one of those things where Remy will be there, and as a rookie in the early test, he can take it a little bit easier. The pressure isn't quite so great when you first get on your new motorcycle and so on and so forth. It's not like he's got to get out that trap flat out first lap, which nowadays, if you don't, then you're that lap behind. And I think that's I always had this old adage that every time you cock your leg over a bike, you got to be faster or learn something. Those are the only two things you do when you race a motorbike. Doesn't matter what the test is. You don't ride round and round in circles for the pleasure of it. You've either got to be faster or you've got to have learned something so you're faster the next time you cock your leg over it. It's the only thing that matters when you're a Grand Prix, any kind of motorcycle race.
I think it's probably worth mentioning, for all of the riders, the Sepang test is a grueling physical. You've got 3 days if you're doing the shakedown, and then you've got a couple of days off, and then 2 days of the official test. Normally it was 3 days of the official test, so they've cut it back by a day. But even so, they come from testing in Jerez in late autumn. This is going to be quite a shock. I mean, you see guys, they've got blisters. They haven't been on MotoGP bikes, and then to do it at Sepang of all places, in that punishing heat and everything else, it's going to be a shock for everybody. So, Remy's going to be sore, but you know what? They're all going to be sore. They're all going to be feeling the pain of it. And to be honest, I wouldn't be surprised if the first day of the shakedown, you don't see many riders rushing out. That'll probably be the test riders only. Usually the race guys that say Aprilia, they usually start day 2. As I say, now they've knocked a day off the official test. Maybe that will change. But it was always kind of the feeling that, look, you need to pace yourself because of course, you've been off the bike all winter. You want to be keen. You want to get out there as soon as the track goes green and just ride. But physically, that's such a 6 days as it used to be within the space of about 8 days. That's a hard thing to do. And then you're going to Indonesia. I mean, that's not going to be an easy ride either. So, yeah, I mean, it's going to be a spare a thought for all of them. And that includes the mechanics in pit lane.
Nice touch on that as well. Track cleaning up from those first few days. I've been to the Sepang test, and the track, if they've had some kind of Ferrari, corporate thing or whatever it is, and the track's covered in marbles and it's grubby and it's horrible, it takes 2 days to clean the track up. Alex Briggs, ex of Yamaha, of course, used to call it the Sweat Olympics whenever you went to Malaysia. It's not just the riders. The mechanics and the techs are working in that heat, and they are dripping all over everything. It's really, really, when the humidity's high and it's hot, and that is Sepang, then you know all about it.
Well, we'll find out soon. Looking forward a little bit to the testing next week. Of course, we've had a couple of teams already unveil their bikes.